Hello everyone, welcome to my channel SW Metro official channel. Kody Brown's recent connection to something as intense and disciplined as a special forces move after the tragic passing of his son Garrison has sparked widespread speculation, not just among Sister Wives fans but also within wider conversations about grief, masculinity, family breakdown, and the desperate measures people sometimes take to reclaim a sense of purpose after devastating loss. And while Kody has always been a figure defined by volatility, contradictions, and bursts of erratic energy that both alienated and attracted people within his orbit, the idea that he might choose a special forces-inspired path, whether literally training with veterans, embracing a militaristic fitness regimen, or symbolically adopting the discipline and emotional toughness associated with special forces culture, speaks volumes about where his headspace might be in the aftermath of losing Garrison, because grief, particularly for a parent losing a child, is not something that follows a predictable or orderly timeline. It crashes into every facet of life, leaving the survivor searching for structure, meaning, and even punishment for what feels like their failure. And Kody, who has been lambasted for years as self-centered, unkind, and unable to truly connect with his older children, may now be trying to recalibrate his image and his identity by leaning into a hypermasculine, hyper-resilient model of behavior, which makes sense when we consider that Kody has always performed strength and control rather than actually embodying them. His obsession with control over his wives, his constant posturing about leadership, and his inability to tolerate dissent were signs of insecurity rather than confidence. But now that grief has leveled him, stripped away his power plays, and forced him into a corner, perhaps the appeal of Special Forces toughness lies in its promise of an unbreakable framework. Wake up early, push your body until it hurts, discipline the mind to obey commands, and silence emotion in favor of survival tactics. Yet this raises a dark question: is Kody trying to heal, or is he punishing himself? Because when someone loses a child to tragedy, especially under circumstances where there was tension, estrangement, and unresolved conflict, as there reportedly was between Kody and Garrison, it can lead to a grief that isn't just sorrow but is contaminated with guilt, regret, and a sense of moral failure. And guilt often drives people to extremes, making them seek out pain as a form of penance. And what could be more punishing yet purifying, in Kody's mind, than Special Forces-style training, the kind that breaks people down to rebuild them, stripping away excuses and forcing accountability, even if such accountability can never bring his son back? And here lies the symbolic dimension. Maybe Kody sees in Special Forces culture an archetype of the father he wishes he had been: strong, reliable, heroic, a man his sons could respect, a man who commands loyalty without begging for it. And in trying to mimic this, he might hope to rewrite his legacy, even as it's too late to repair what was broken with Garrison. But still, grief warps logic, and grief-driven choices are rarely about practicality, they are about survival. And for someone like Kody, who has alienated Christine, Janelle, and Mary, and now faces a marriage with Robin that many say looks strained and joyless, he may be trying to find identity outside of polygamy, outside of family leadership, outside of TLC cameras, by embracing something entirely new. And in the American imagination, Special Forces occupy a mythic space, a blend of sacrifice, grit, and redemption, qualities that Kody might crave as a way to redefine himself in a narrative that no longer paints him as the villain. But whether this is genuine healing or just another performance for cameras and attention is difficult to untangle, because grief can make someone authentic in ways they've never been before. But Kody's history suggests that he often uses dramatic gestures to mask rather than confront underlying pain. And if his Special Forces move is about optics, posting photos of push-ups in the desert, posing with survival gear, or hinting at tactical training, it could be more about image management than inner growth. Yet even so, it reveals the desperation underneath. Because men who grieve without emotional outlets often lean into extremes of physicality and stoicism rather than therapy and connection. And it wouldn't be surprising if Kody, uncomfortable with showing raw vulnerability, sought to make his grief look like discipline rather than devastation. And yet the truth is, no amount of discipline can erase the fact that Garrison felt so distant from his father, so unsupported, that the relationship collapsed long before tragedy struck. And Kody, whether he admits it or not, is now haunted by that distance, haunted by missed calls, words unsaid, and the knowledge that his son's life ended while their relationship remained fractured, which is why any special forces attempt feels like both a search for healing and a cry of guilt, an attempt to bury one kind of pain beneath another, and while it might appeal to him, it also risks alienating him further from those around him, because Robin may not understand why her husband is suddenly consumed by this militaristic obsession. Christine and Janelle will likely view it as another selfish performance, and Mary may simply dismiss it as irrelevant, but his children, especially those still reeling from Garrison's passing, might see it as avoidance rather than reconciliation, because what they likely want from Kody is softness, apologies, accountability, and presence, not push-ups, battle cries, or desert marches. And this mismatch between what he chooses to offer and what his family actually needs has defined his failures as a father for years, yet in grief, people often regress to old patterns, doubling down on the very strategies that never worked before, and so if Kody is indeed pursuing a special forces move, whether as literal training or symbolic lifestyle, it's not surprising, it's consistent with his need to control narrative and self-image, but it also speaks to the tragedy of grief itself, how it can drive someone not toward connection but toward solitude and punishment, and while fans may scoff at the idea, others may sympathize, recognizing that in the chaos of losing a child, no choice feels rational, and every attempt to reclaim life feels like a desperate gamble, because how else can a man who has lost so much, wives, children, reputation, and now a son, try to survive than by embracing something that promises toughness, order, and transformation, even if it's built on the rubble of unresolved grief. And so the real story isn't whether Kody is genuinely training like special forces but whether he can ever stop running from the softer work of grief, the tears, the apologies, the listening, the accountability, and until he faces that, every tactical maneuver, every survival march, every act of discipline will remain what it likely is, a grief-driven choice, symbolic, dramatic, but ultimately insufficient to heal the wound of losing Garrison. Kody Brown sent seismic shockwaves through a clan already fractured by the dissolution of 3 marriages and the profound ideological rifts stemming from the COVID-19 pandemic. In the aftermath of such an unimaginable loss, the family's grief manifested in myriad ways. Christine and Janelle found solace in the unwavering bond of their sister-wife alliance and their children. Mary retreated further into a shell of long-standing isolation, and Robin, ever the self-appointed custodian of Kody's emotions, doubled down on her role as the weeping protector of her husband's fragile spirit. But Kody's own expression of grief was perhaps the most symbolically charged and analytically complex. His decision to shave off his signature, flowing, lion-like mane of hair, a style he had defiantly maintained for decades, and adopt a stark, severe buzz cut, a visual transformation he explicitly dubbed his special forces move. This was far more than a simple change in appearance, it was a profound, grief-driven psychological pivot, a desperate and visceral attempt to armor a shattered ego, annihilate the failed patriarch of the past, and construct a new, hardened identity capable of surviving a pain that his pluralistic, patriarchal worldview had utterly failed to anticipate or withstand. This special forces persona was not an evolution but a reactionary fortress, built on the rubble of his perceived failures, a performative act of masculine crisis meant to cut away the very threads connecting him to the family he felt he had lost long before Garrison's passing, and to the man he no longer believed he could be. To fully grasp the significance of this transformation, one must first understand the semiotic weight of Kody's hair within the narrative of Sister Wives. For over a decade, his lush, curly locks were his most defining physical characteristic, an integral part of his personal brand. They were not merely hair, they were a symbol of his unique identity, his youthful energy, his rebellious spirit against monogamous norms, and his charismatic, if often misguided, leadership. The hair was part of the Kody Brown sales pitch, the flamboyant patriarch who could juggle 4 wives and a brood of children, a man who presented himself as a maverick swimming against the current of conventional society. It was a symbol of abundance, of virility, of a certain flamboyant confidence that, however frayed, held his complex family structure together. In many ways, his hair was the visual representation of the principle he so often preached, abundant, unruly, and demanding constant attention and maintenance. Its loss, therefore, was not a trivial act of grooming but a symbolic self-amputation of a core part of his public and private identity, a deliberate erasure of the man who had presided over the family's golden years and its subsequent catastrophic decline. Garrison's death, however, presented a form of pain that Kody's existing toolbox of patriarchal platitudes and performative leadership could not fix. The tragedy was an absolute, a void that could not be filled with grand speeches or strategic family meetings. It laid bare the